We're all set.
Call the October 10th meeting of the Norwalk Redevelopment order. Roll call attending, we have myself, Mary Peniston, and David Westmoreland. Joining us on the staff, Brian Bedoli, Katie, and Miss Eugenia. Any public participation? Anyone online want to participate publicly? No? Moving on to administration, approval of the minutes of the September 12th regular meeting. Do I have a motion? So moved by Mary Peniston. I'll second. Any changes, adjustments? No, nothing? All in favor? Aye. Carried unanimously. The financials approved the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency Statement of Revenues and Expenditures for Operating Fund 100 for year to date, August 31st, 2023. Eugenia, you're on.
Yes, thank you, John. For year to date, August 31st, the Operating Fund 100 had actual revenues of $280,000 versus budgeted revenues of $252,000 for a favorable variance of $28,000. And total actual expenditures of $303,000 versus budgeted expenditures of $325,000 resulted in a favorable variance of $22,000. This is mostly due to favorable variance in personnel expenses. And the actual operating deficit of $23,000 versus a budgeted operating deficit of $73,000 resulted in a favorable variance of $50,000. And that's all.
That's it. We have a motion to approve the revenues and expenditures from Fund 100. David, seconded. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Moving away from administration to the work program update, I'll turn it over to Brian.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. Nice to see you all. Just wanted to provide a general work program update, similar to how I did a couple months back, and trying to include more of that as we go forward with the with our meetings, as requested by some of you. So I've highlighted a few specific projects on tonight's agenda that I wanted to highlight, and then I'm going to go over just sort of give you a little insight in terms of how we're tracking things internally, just so you have an idea what's going on. And if there anything comes up over the course of the month, feel free to reach out to me. We could go over anything specific. The first one I have on here is the Webster Lot project. I know many of you are familiar with the work we did in terms of the public outreach. So we're still working with the selected developer sort of to define the work program and next steps. We had our financial analysis completed by the infrastructure advisors group that you all approved a while back. We're now folding those findings into the negotiation process, and we'll be able to report out on that in the next couple of months here. But the next step, in order to kind of advance that discussion with the developer, we needed to engage additional legal services, because a lot of the decisions that we're making or deal structuring has legal ramifications to it. And with the last deal that we did on behalf of the city, we were relying a lot on city corporation counsel. Also outside counsel, when we started getting to the land disposition agreement phase, when we actually started structuring the deal and how we're going to sell the land. But city corporation counsel and our office felt, given the scale and scope of the Webster project, I think it's prudent to engage a firm more so on the front end. So we've gone through a process of actually a selection process with city corporation counsel. We issued an RFP looking for firms, got a number of referrals for people that specifically do this sort of P3 large scale work. So we've actually been, we've moved forward with selecting a counsel from Hawkins and Wood based out of the city. And what I'm bringing it to you tonight is part of that involves signing of an engagement letter, which is just effectively talking about the hourly rates that we're going to pay. There isn't really a specific contract with a specified amount, but I wanted to let you all know that we were moving forward with that. And then the expenses are still going to be moving towards city capital, which we did for the land disposition agreement. But there will be a recurring line item on our budget in terms of us accruing legal expenses, because we're going to be pursuing the developer to repay those once we get the deal structured. But there's no contract, but I wanted you all to be aware of that sort of specific arrangement on that. So I'm happy to any questions if you want to hear more about on the project side or on the legal side. I should also mention we actually needed a support from another firm, a construction law firm, regarding some of our procurement questions that we had. So that's a small engagement, but that was also a letter that was signed over the past month here.
David?
Brian, are we looking for big grants from the state for this project? For any?
Yeah, well, we were fortunate. We got the $8 million through the SIF program. So that's a big one that we got. So that's gonna be all the site infrastructure. So looking at the sewer replacement, doing the laterals, streetscapes, and some infrastructure on the site. And we also received $2 million from the state for the brownfield cleanup and $2 million from the EPA for the brownfield cleanup as well. But we are still pursuing different grants as the project develops.
Is the developer looking for grants or funding or financing from the state?
They're not. They're kind of relying on us in that regard, given the way that the funding sources are structured, typically towards the municipality. They may be looking for financing once we get to that point, but as it stands right now, that's the sort of public assistance package we've been putting together.
Is this the standard 10% affordable housing? They're not looking for, are we looking for 20, 30?
Yeah,
40?
20 out of this project. Basically, we stated it as a project goal, and it's a requirement of the SIF grant as well as the DECD brownfields grant that we received, is that they provide some factor, either 20% affordable housing or 10% at a very low income band. And what we've pushed them for as part of this program is 10% at the very low income, basically 10% at the very low income band and 10% at the more typical 80% AMI.
Do you think the developer will be looking for some extra funding or financing for the project for their development costs?
That hasn't been contemplated at present. It's mostly a debt equity package that we've been talking about, in addition to the public assistance that we're providing.
In terms of they'll be seeking private
Equity. Yeah, that's what they're doing right now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, Mary. You might be on mute, Mary. Oh, there you
I
are.
need to find my unmute button, sorry. David, thank you for asking those questions, because it was many of the same questions I had. Brian, you had always said that the only way you could get up affordability was with grants. Is there any intention to look for more grants?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly looking for new grants. It's just about what are going to be eligible expenses that the state is interested in funding. And often that relies on infrastructure. We've kind of financed that piece. We're looking for grants for the garage piece, but not a lot of people are interested in funding garages, unfortunately. We've pursued RAISE, we've pursued DECD, we've pursued a lot of different sources for that. And that's the specific component. In terms of the actual vertical construction, it's challenging to get a market rate project financed through grant funding. It's mostly related to the infrastructure. So we're still pursuing grants in that regard as they come up.
And what brownfields are being addressed? Where are the brownfields?
Yeah, Webster Lot has about 5.5. We have a preliminary plan where Webster Lot has about $5.5 million of contamination need that we're looking to clean up. So we've received $4 million out of that. And we just actually went through interviews today for our to hire an environmental professional to help start that process of cleaning up the site. But once we get a better idea in terms of the specific remediation plan, we're going to pursue that remaining delta, either through EPA or DCD.
So 2 questions. One, what is it contaminated by? And the second question is, what is the window that you're anticipating to seek more grants?
Yeah, so I think, it's as like best I could refer to it, it was typical stuff that you'd have in any sort of industrial post-industrial city. I could send the preliminary phase 2. I don't want to misquote it because I don't have the specific contaminants, but I mean there's basic PCB, arsenic sort of things that are in there that I think are better explained by the environmental professional that prepared the report. If you'd like us to send that, I'm happy to do so. And then the window for the next grants, I mean we're always tied up in terms of wanting to get the grant but the proper time in order to implement it, because they don't want us to wait around too much with the money. So I think once we get the grant plan, the remediation plan in place, which I hope to have more towards the first of the year, we'll probably start looking to apply in the spring, summer.
And so the reason I'm asking about the period is because I know that there's still some consideration of a lot of discussion about affordable housing at the legislature this year.
Mhm.
So even though I know there's not a lot of room to move, I was just wondering if there's the possibility of going past this second year of the legislative session, that there might be more grants available that could be applied for, or will it be too late?
No, I think that'll be the right time. I think they've already allocated a lot of the money to the existing funding programs that we've been talking about. I don't know if that answers your question specifically. I don't think
I
it's
just think
never
there's
too
gonna be-
late because we're gonna have a pretty long development cycle in terms of how we phase this project. But you know, we're aggressively pursuing them.
Are they looking for tax incentives from the state and the city?
No, just the existing enterprise zone legislation is all that we basically told them that's all they're, you know, eligible for.
Okay.
So
Right.
Brian, have they completed a phase 2 and 3 environmental assessment?
We have. So we had done a phase 2 a while back, and then I had a APCO, what's referred to as, or like the draft APCO prepared in anticipation of the grant application.
Yep.
And so with the grant application, we're going to develop that phase 3 or remedial action plan.
So they haven't, with that, the phase 3, they'll go out and do core samples and all that stuff.
Well, they've already done sample. I mean, we did that. It's our property at the end of the day right now. So it's the city owned. So with the city conducted the phase 2, phase 3, we're pretty far along. We have a draft cleanup plan, but it needs to be refined.
Okay.
So they've already done testing in that regard, but they'll have to go back and do more testing, like to get a real full extent of the contamination, similar to what we're doing by the train station right now.
I don't remember what was over there, but I don't think it was industrial use for the most part. I think it was like hotels.
It was like resident low. It was actually low density residential, but there were industrial uses interspersed. The contamination isn't too extensive. It's not across the whole site. It's primarily on the southern and northern portions of the site. But yeah, it's just everything here has some sort of history to it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
So I could keep going on the next item if we're hot on the topic of brownfields. I'm happy to keep that going. So as you recall, we received a $200,000 grant from DCD for the brownfields GIS project that we've been developing. That's been actively underway. We've hired a number of consultants since the approvals you provided, VHB to do the environmental research, DKSR, who's doing a lot of the sort of front end development of the actual application, and providing consulting services as we start working with the development community and environmental professionals to define what they would find the most beneficial to an online application for them when they come to Norwalk and say, okay, I'm interested in doing some development, or I have a client that is trying to, what information can we provide them to help make that process easier? The idea being that we're making it easier to do business in Norwalk, but easier to get information from the state and federal government. The ultimate intent of the actual application, apart from categorizing and presenting economic, environmental, and social indicators, for education purposes, is also to offer a portal for licensed environmental professionals, so that when they click on a site, they don't have to go drive up to the state deep, or they don't have to go dig around EPA. We're going to have all those documents ready for them in an online system for Norwalk properties that they can just access through our portal, which is a huge time saver and a huge cost saver for people that are involved in this work. So we've been actively working on that. I think we're about halfway through our contract with VHB. We're starting to look at the actual application design with VHB and DKSR. And again, some of these approvals occurred a while back, so I just wanted to come to you, give you guys an update so you kind of know where they all stand. But we're moving along well on that project.
Okay.
Qualification, Brian. You said, who will this GIS system be accessible to? You said licensed professionals?
It's going to be, so there's going to be multiple user groups effectively and that's what we're kind of unpacking right now, but we're definitely going to have some public component where people can, access some of the more pertinent data from a public perspective. And there's going to be a deeper component for licensed environmental professionals. You don't need a license to get to the software, but it's only going to be information that they're really going to be interested in. I would say, people could definitely go and start looking at documents, potentially, depends how we set up the user credentials on it. But the idea is that they could access the actual old historical documents, things that, for their phase 1, phase 2 research that they typically need to go to a number of disparate places. They'll have one place to do that. And then also city staff internally. So we're trying to create basically we're defining in our current engagement with DKSR, these user groups that you're asking about, what they want to see, how they want to see it, how we should section certain information off within the context of the actual application viewer.
I guess what I was trying to drive at, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It's just that if the public wants to dig deeper, will they be excluded from it in any way?
Not likely. It's
Okay.
all publicly available information. I think it's just what it always comes down to is just, making it user friendly at the same time. It's not about the information, it's making it so that they're not having too many functions all in front of them, because then it becomes a useless application. So that's what the
I
game is.
understood that.
really
I just
about.
wanted to make sure that given, I think there'll be increased interest. I just wanted to make sure if somebody wants to dig deep, they're not going to have trouble getting the information they wanted.
Yeah, no problem. Definitely.
But it sounds great.
Next.
All right, the only two other items, unless there's any other questions on that, were just quick updates on the historical inventory. I know we had a conversation at the last meeting regarding the actual scale and scope. We went back to the drawing board. We had a meeting with David and Todd Bryant and also city staff. We retooled the scope a little bit, and we've all agreed that it's probably best, since it's changed so much, that we're going to go out and rebid that. So there'll be more to come on that. Nothing immediate tonight. And then on the design review item, we basically started the conversations that we talked about at the last meeting with our attorneys. Currently, they're still involved in the legal review, where there's a number of things that we need to consider. And I want to put together a memo for you all, so you all could kind of see what that looks like and the things that we need to be talking about as we start talking about any modifications to the design review process. So that's under development, and I will keep you posted as we move forward from there. And one thing I could show you too, and this is, I mentioned it to David earlier, and this is probably a little esoteric within the context of what we do, but I'll share my screen real quick. Let me see. Oops. Give me 1 second, sorry. So as I said, we maintain internal lists on all our projects. We have everything that we meet weekly as a staff, go over each project, where things are, who needs to do what the sub projects are, down to the micro level. So if any of you ever have a question, I'm either happy to share this, or you could just ask me if there's a specific project. We'll extract whatever information from you, but we have a pretty standardized way that we're keeping track of all these how we herd the cats here at the agency, is how I would say that. So just want to make sure you know that's available. And what David suggested, and I agree with, like every quarter, perhaps I'll do a larger scale work program update, so you guys are in tune with kind of what we're doing from a development project perspective.
Good, thank you. Continuing, moving on. Moving on to the next item. Item 6, the Maritime Aquarium Economic Impact Analysis. We are going to authorize the executive director to execute any and all agreements with Consult Solutions for additional economic and fiscal impact services. Do I have a
Yeah,
motion?
so thank you, Chairman. So as you'll recall, with some of the ARPA money the city gave us, we worked as a project manager effectively for the Maritime Aquarium to do an economic impact analysis. I included that just for your reference. I mean, it's not entirely pertinent to our discussion, but as we were doing the economic impact analysis, obviously some of the inputs that they were working with were related to, okay, well, what were the impacts actually derived from new development in the area? And our agency a while back had done an economic impact analysis through a firm called WZHA, and it cataloged projects up through 2014 in terms of how much property tax they generated, what was the benefit to the city, what was the expense side, how much did it draw on school services, how much did it draw on infrastructure and the like. So what I'm proposing to do, and as we discussed with the firm, it was a great experience working with the firm, number one, and they have a good capacity in this regard. I'd like to update that report because I think it's very helpful for us, particularly when we go into, either requesting funds, looking for new grant opportunities, either from the city or from the state. It's really helpful for me to have some numbers to point to in terms of our impact on the city, in terms of the development projects we do. So this will be a pretty lightweight update of the economic impact study that WZHA did for us. But that's what you have before you tonight. We're going to take a look at what happened since 2014. Take a look at what development projects have come online, Also look at opportunities, what revenue, could exist or could have existed from these past projects if we looked at things like impact fees or certain different fee structures that would be of interest to the city. Just kind of taking a cursory review to sort of determine that at where we are today and how we're doing.
Okay, any questions? Any comments?
I'm glad you said that the purpose of it was because you wanted to be able to have that data from independent source to be able to use, because actually when I read through it, I didn't think that I'm not sure it was very compelling to me. I mean, even though I know it has a big impact, the way that they presented the numbers, et cetera, it wasn't, I could see how you could use it from a technical sense, but for the general public, I don't think it was very helpful in terms of understanding what the impact of the aquarium was. So I'm glad to know that what the purpose was is more for your own internal purposes to be able to cite reliable data, because I didn't really understand what the purpose of it, the way that it was written up.
Yeah, there's definitely more from an economist perspective, just looking at the technical impact. And that was really a key component of what ARPA funded. We didn't want it to be a marketing report. It needed to be really just getting this data. And then what we could use that for is that sort of advocacy, it's information to feed advocacy as opposed to the advocacy itself, if that makes sense.
Just how is the aquarium doing these days?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, pretty good. They're up in numbers. They have a good reserve. They're at this report, shows what $80 million plus of economic impact in the city. So I think they've done a good job coming out of the pandemic, which I know was a big constraint on them.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? No. I think David made the motion. He didn't know. He doesn't know it, but he did. All in favor? Aye. Carried unanimously. Any new business you want to put on the table? Anybody wants to put on the table? No? That's old business. We've gone over. Someone want to make a motion to adjourn? Mary looks like she does.
I thought there was something about design review on the agenda.
That's what I was referring to. I'm just having legal review it right now, David. So I need to get an opinion letter put together just so you can understand the legal ramifications of any changes that you'd be interested in.
What are you proposing?
I think we should talk about it with legal first.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's complicated. This is the most I can say.
Well, just don't, if you, I will have opinions on this likely. So as long as it's not you're expecting a rubber stamp on whatever comes out, that's fine. Otherwise,
Would there be interest in doing like a working group in this regard or something of that accord? Would that be helpful or?
Well, I'm interested in how we do design review, because it's one of the few levers we have to actually have any influence at all on development. So, and I don't really want to give that up. And it's kind of murky right now anyway. So I just want to make sure that the process is going to include us and not exclude the commission.
Yep, that is the intent. I just want to make sure I get all the cobwebs out of the closet first before we start
And that's
going
fine.
through
And if you
things.
want to have a working session on it, I'm
Yeah.
certainly up for that.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
I'd be interested too, because I'd like to understand where that is.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Happy
And
to
I
do
think
that.
David's point is very well taken, that about, yeah. So I'd be interested also.
No problem. We'll follow back up before the next meeting because we're actively working through it. So we'll get back with you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none? Mary made a motion to adjourn. All
Second.
in favor? Unanimous. Have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah, you're gonna need me to sign checks this week?
John, I think next week we're gonna do them.
Next week?
that-
Okay,
Is that okay with you? Okay.
that's fine.
Good.
Just wanted to check.
Yep.
So,
Right.
have a
Hey,
good
Brian,
evening. Bye.
Yeah.
just one question. I was thinking, you remember that land, that building that was condemned where you tried to put together the deal around the corner from Divine?
Oh, 20, yeah. 2500.
Is that a possibility for the 6 Butler?
I brought that up. I brought that up.
Figured you
NHA
did.
now, I think the Housing Authority now has that jurisdiction. So you might want to talk to Adam about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
that would make more sense.
Yeah, I brought that up months ago. I agree.
All right, thank you.
Good deal. Take care. Thanks.
Take
Bye.
care. Good night.